Hi, I'm Brook Urick, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Thanks for coming on my show. I love that we get to have these incredible conversations. There's so many. So I'm working with a guy named Al Bradley, and he works in a space where people who are abused or have taken to drugs to cope with things, and he helps recover them. So we're doing a show together, and I'm getting to hear from all these people in all these different communities that have been exposed to as horrors. They're abused, they're exploited, whatever it is. And I don't think that when you live in a fairly normal, calm world, which can be filled with its own horrors, but I don't think we understand just how much exposure to harm is out there. So I appreciate you coming on and talking about your book, about your experiences, and what we're talking about today.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for reaching out, Pete.
Yeah. So give us some background because people aren't gonna they're gonna be like, what are you talking about? But I guess like what's sugaring? Let's start there.
Well, I worked behind the scenes at a really popular sugar daddy dating site for about 5 years. And the reason I got my job was I was actually a user of the website. They cast me to appear in the media for them and paid me, of course, for my media appearance. So I got sort of a back alley kind of idea of what sugar is because I was actually sort of preyed upon on the website myself. And then I ended up joining the cogs. Of the machine as a PR rep and spokesperson. So to answer
Mhm.
your question, I think what sugaring is a glorified name for sex work. Um, Sometimes it's considered like the girlfriend experience, which is
Right.
like where the sex worker pretends she actually likes the client and goes on trips or stays overnight, but it is sex work, often with more emotional labor. But what sugar daddy websites tout themselves as, and note that many sugar daddy websites don't even put sugar daddy on them anymore. It's sort of just like known by the population on the website that that's what it is. But
Yeah.
they started not using that term anymore because it's associated with sex work and they could be shut down right by FOSTA SESTA. So I think when people join the site, they assume that well, when sugar babies join the site, they assume that they're going to be meeting qualified, affluent, rich men who are going to spoil them and show them this fabulous lifestyle. But if you think about supply and demand, like there really just aren't enough rich men to go around. And what the site really breeds is a playground for predators and abusers because it's intentionally anonymous. And I think when people join the site, they think, oh, like anonymity, that's to like protect me and protect my identity. But what it's really there for is to protect the predators so that you
Mhm.
don't know who you're talking to. And if someone abuses you or rapes you or impregnates you or frauds you, like actual financial fraud, then you don't have any recourse. And the websites prey on vulnerable populations who don't have any money, who are young, sometimes underage, because there are no protections in place on dating websites that prevent underage users from joining, except for a little question mark that asks, "How old are you?" And as we all know, kids are smart, so they'll just lie
Yes.
about their age. So yeah, it's this place where very nefarious things go on. But of course, they say, no, 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 we do lots to protect our members. But I know from working internally, I know firsthand that they don't do hardly anything to protect their members. But who they do protect is the abusers, the anonymous abusers.
Yeah, that's wild. Why does someone when any of these websites when they reach out to the female side of the equation, how on earth do they convince people via the web to take on this job?
Do you mean how do they get people to join the website, or how do the abusers get people to meet up with them?
I mean, how does the website entice sugar babies to become part of their community of sugar babydom?
Currently, I don't think they do a lot because the marketing is already in place and there just is such a
Mm,
large group of users on the website already. But back when I was working there, I began working there in 2014, and I left in 2018, at the end of 2018. So I worked there for about 5 years. And during the time that I was working there, we would exaggerate success ad nauseum and tell the users that you're going to have a sugar daddy pay for your college tuition. And oh, no, 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 you don't need to sleep with him. You just should get paid because you're special and different from everyone else. And we would pay case studies to appear in news media for us. Of course, they were told to lie and to say not only that they were never paid for sex, but also that they weren't paid to be there, which journalistic integrity, suggests that you can't have case studies who are paid, because then do you know if they're really telling the truth, or are they just telling you a story because you're paying them?
Right.
So yeah, we would coach and cast each case study. And I was a case study who was coached and cast. And that's how I ended up meeting the people who worked at the company and ended up getting the job that I had, which was a PR manager and spokesperson.
So the girl who needs money because of whatever circumstance sees this as an opportunity, and ends, and the means kind of become not that important. Especially if you do, they truly believe that there's no sexual ask in these exchanges coming in?
I think a lot of them do. I think
Okay,
a lot of them, they think it's going to be only platonic, and they really think that they're going to get what they want because that's what the marketing suggests. We would tell the
right.
girls when we would cast them, we would say, oh, well, you don't really want to say you've had sex with a sugar daddy who paid you, because people might get the wrong idea and they might think you were paid for sex. So it's better if you just say you don't have sex.
Mm.
So then people are led to believe, oh, well, this girl is being successful. This girl's getting her tuition paid and she didn't have to have any sex. So I can too. And that is the story I detail in the book, which is how your perspective changes. At first, you just think, well, what's so wrong with an older guy giving me money? Like, I'm beautiful. Like, I deserve that. And then the true reality of the situation is they use the marketing of seeking, and they pick up where the marketing leaves off, and they say, oh yes, I'll treat you, until they get what they want, which is sex, of course. And then they leave you high and dry. But furthermore, it actually opens up lots of people to like financial fraud, like actual fraud,
Yeah.
because when young people are desperate and they don't have the knowledge of like the Nigerian prince check scam, because
Yeah.
they're 18 years old and they just got a checkbook last week. So they don't understand about these scams. And Seeking's marketing tells them that, oh, well, there's all these rich guys that just want to give me money. So then when someone reaches out to them and say, hey, I'm a rich guy that wants to give you money, I'll send you a check for $2,000 and then you just have to send me $500 back. They're like, okay. Like, they
Mm.
don't know. So it actually opens up so many people to being scammed and frauded, not just with their bodies, but actually like monetarily, which is super scary because these girls are so young, so young.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't have a responsible adult somewhere in your life to go, let me look at that. 'Cause sometimes you can just look at a website and be like, this is a bunch of bullshit here, right? Because you can see it's paper thin. But yeah, because there's questions like there certainly would be background investigations on these people, whatever it's going to be, and then you don't see those resources. And but if you don't have that person in your life, yeah, you just are left to, you're a rube. That's what you are. You're a rube, left to believe everything.
Yeah, and the culture of shame and secrecy around sex work leads people to stay silent. Like, they don't want to tell anyone in their lives that they're interested in this and that they need money and that they're desperate for
Mhm.
money, because of, I don't know, social media facades that lead everyone to believe that people are living these fantastic lives when they actually like have rented cars and they're like millions of dollars in debt. But people just believe what they see on the internet, because we're in this crazy paradox where the internet is more real than real life, and real life sometimes doesn't even matter. And it drives people to do things that are out of character.
Yeah. Are there Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. It's so crazy. I'm dying to ask this though. Are there any success stories where a sugar daddy and a sugar baby end up becoming in a romance, because you can sell that all day long to attract other sugar babies and sugar daddies?
Yes, certainly. I like to use the phrase, a broken clock is right twice a day. That doesn't mean
Right.
you
Yeah.
should use it to tell time. Because
Right.
the truth is, if there is a success story, then brava. Like, I have heard of some of those. I'm not going to say they don't exist, but
Right.
then they get off the website. So that user's gone. But the
Mm,
who's left is the person, the predator, who hits dozens, hundreds,
right.
thousands of victims. So there are so many more victims than there are predators. And
Mm,
by, the real logic of what's really going on, it's like you really can't take the 1% of case studies that it actually does
yeah.
work out for, and then equate that to some sort of success, because in my experience, if a man is on seeking arrangement, he's not a good guy.
Yeah.
He's not doing the work on himself to be a present partner and to be emotionally available and in a real relationship. Most of the time he's married and lying to his wife
Mm,
or lying to someone. Usually they want relationships and sex to be easy, so they're willing to pay for that. But oftentimes they are just willing to lie and say they're going to give someone money in order to get what they want and then move on to the next. And it's really scary because, new sugar baby users, their profiles are adorned with this little badge that says new user. So the ones who haven't been victimized or preyed upon yet are clearly seen and available. You can filter by age, 18. You can filter by new user. So this girl's 18 and she's a brand new user. So she has no idea what lies ahead of her. And she's the perfect mark. So the website is, in my opinion, designed and curated to protect predators. And that's exactly what they do. So it's very
yeah.
terrifying, honestly.
It is. It is terrifying. And then there's that secondary exposure to other scams too. So even if you do get money, oh my goodness. What's the pimp's take? What does the website take from creating that exchange?
The sugar daddy users, the men pay to use the site. There's a monthly subscription of, I mean, I
Mhm.
don't know what it is anymore, but when I was working there, it was $99 a month. And I
Mhm.
mean, as you can probably deduce, you don't have to be rich to afford $99 a month. So it's a steal if you ask them to have a bevy of wide-eyed sugar babies just at the
Yeah.
ready. And it sort of flips the script on modern dating, right? Because most dating sites, if a guy like isn't really very attractive and like he's kind of an older gentleman, he's not going to really be getting any attention from like young girls. But
Right.
on Seeking Arrangement, oh boy, got a
Yeah.
inbox full of messages because all these girls think he's going to give her money and he
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
actually have to have any money to give. And that's shown time and time again in the media, with the horror stories that they publish. I remember this one
Mhm.
story from the Toronto Star in 2015, where this sugar daddy that I cast when I was like newly working there and like had no idea that this would be the case. But the Toronto Star took this terrible picture of him in his hoarder looking basement of a bedroom, and posted that as their, main picture. And it's like, the stories like that don't get enough attention where it's like, no, this is who you're really talking to. Like, not that like rich, hot guy. Like, most of the guys are not hot and not rich.
Right. It's not Richard Gere and need someone to stand next to him for a weekend.
Well,
Yeah.
like, think about it. Does a real rich hot guy need a website to find girls?
No.
Like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah. 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 And even if you're just going like, look, I can understand the situation where someone who's wealthy is like, I'm not here for a relationship. I just need a date for this thing. And you're going to reach into your network because you don't want to just date some person from a website because that's going to expose yourself to even more risk than anything else. I mean, that would be crazy, right? You would go to your network of people and say, I just no strings, just a good night out. Let's go. You wouldn't go to a website for that. I don't think.
No, I mean, furthermore, like, it goes both ways. Like, there are many instances where the sugar baby side of the equation steals from the daddy. He leaves his wallet
Right.
on the table and she takes his credit card, or she steals his watch when he's sleeping, or like whatever it is. Like, it goes both ways. There's
Yeah.
desperation and opportunism on
Yeah.
either side of the equation that gets exploited serially.
So how does the girl get paid when the sugar baby goes out? Is there beyond the subscription? Is there money exchanged through the website?
No, that's actually part of the business model, right? Because if they get involved in the exchange of money for
Right.
whatever, then that makes them, explicitly criminally liable. And they, of course, forbid the exchange of sex for money on the website. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And if
Mhm.
anyone does get caught doing on the website, they say, hey, no, 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 don't do that on the website, which of course implies do that off the website. Like, we don't care, do it off the website. But no, the girls have to arrange their own payment. And so if a guy says like, oh yeah, sleep with me, I'll Venmo you $2,000, and then he never does, but she sleeps with him, what is she going to do? Is she going to go to the
Right.
cops and say, oh, this guy said I was going to, like, no, obviously she's not going to do that. Is she going to go to the website and say like, oh, this guy scammed me? They don't do anything. They actually don't even do anything in instances of crimes that are reported because they say that, oh, well, you have to have a subpoena for me to give you any information about this man. And of course,
Crazy.
most of the girls are vulnerable and poor. They don't have access to a lawyer. They can't get a subpoena, and they wouldn't even know how to do that, how to begin to do that. And furthermore, if they do go to the police, a lot of the police officers are males. And I mean, even females will be like, well, what did you think you were getting on a website like that? So it's just this constant cycle of abuse that keeps victims silent because they're afraid that nothing will happen. And they're right.
You're saying the internet's a dream? It's not a real thing?
It is a mind, you know what, like to be involved in like such a crazy world where it doesn't matter what is in real life. It only matters what you say and what you tell people. And you can PR the hell out of a situation and say, oh, no, we would never do that. And it's like, well, the company says they would never do that. So it's like, yeah, but there's actually a law that explicitly criminalizes websites who facilitate, support, and assist sex trafficking. It actually shut Backpage down back in 2018. So it's just very curious to me that, this website is in the media, because there are congressmen linked to this website who have paid underage girls for sex, allegedly. And yet the website is still around. It just like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm very curious as to why that's the case.
Yeah. It's also uncomfortable. I mean, you think about if I have a daughter, she's, in a good relationship, she's stable and everything else, but if she was younger and she got hooked on the idea of doing this and hooked on a magical lifestyle, I don't know what I would be able to do to stop her from going on this horrible journey. I mean, you can lock her into a room. That's not any better, because now you're abusing her in other ways. But it's a horror show to think about your daughter being enticed in this way. And it's not hard to sell someone on a dream like that.
It is a horror to think that that would happen. I don't have kids, but I have lots of friends with kids. And you know what I would do? I would say, here you go, and have her read my book before she thinks about doing that. And that's exactly why I wrote the book. I wrote the book that I wished I'd read when I was young, that explains how your perspective changes from when you're young to when you're older. And at first it seems like, oh, like not a big deal, but also I believe that. But the reality is not only is it not true, but you'll live to regret it.
Yeah. And you may not live to regret it. You may end up
Or
in somewhere worse, right? Yeah.
I was literally just thinking that. I was like, or not, but I didn't want to be morbid.
Right. Well, let's be morbid a little bit because there are a lot of dangers. What's not dangerous is right there, that link. You can buy the book. You can go to any one of the websites. I'll put the website up here in a second so you guys can go check it out. You guys know what I always say. Buy two and buddy read it. Buy one for a friend, whatever it is. But this is how you help folks who write books and do great work like this, because this is an uncomfortable topic, because you can already hear. So this is how we support someone like Brooke. I'll put the website up here in a second. You can buy it directly from her. What's the best way? What's the best, fastest way, Brooke, to get you the money for the book? Is it to buy it on the direct link?
Yeah, you can buy it there, but I do send out signed copies to people who DM me on Instagram. So if you want to find me on Instagram at Brook Urick, BROOKURICK, just DM me and I will sell you a signed copy and I'll send it to you.
There you go. When is it? I know it's not too late because you can always get someone the book, but when do you want to get that young person this book so they're like, hey, don't do that, do this? Or when they're desperate for money, like you're saying, a lot of these kids aren't doing this because they're in a good strait. They're in a bad spot. So when and how? What are your thoughts?
I mean, my target demographic is like 16 to 30, people who are interested in monetizing their sexuality. I think, people who are interested in OnlyFans modeling, or just in general, like, I think what we fail to recognize is that sex workers actually make the most money when they are under 18 or when they are 18, because more men than we might care to admit have a proclivity for young, sometimes adolescent girls. And it's pretty terrifying. But, I was sexualized very young. So I was kind of indoctrinated into this idea that you can just take a little birth control pill and then you can have casual sex like a man. But I learned that that's actually not true. Like women are not biologically capable of having casual sex because like we
Mhm.
could become pregnant. So we are the ones who bear the burden of that casual sex, and therefore our bodies do not allow us to have casual sex. Like we will be forever feeling connected to that man or wanting that man to be connected to us because our body tricks us into thinking we need that man because we might be in a vulnerable pregnant position one day.
Mhm.
And I was not taught that. I was taught to take a little blue pill and then you don't have to worry about it. But what I didn't realize is the little blue pill made me absolutely crazy. It's like we wonder why like women are so emotional and crazy. It's like, well, maybe it's because we're forcing hormones down their throats. Like, I don't know. It seems like the sexual revolution, third wave feminism, like failed us a little bit, and we don't
Yeah.
want to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say take a pill for anything. You're too fat, take a pill. You're too skinny, take a pill. Whatever it is, you want bigger muscles, take a pill. We prescribe a lot of those things, and the consequences, are left to the end user, right?
Yeah, I think there's like a statistic that the average American takes 3 pills a day,
Yes.
because people want the easy way out. They don't want to have to work for the nice body. They don't want to have to
Yeah.
get healthy. And when you go to the doctor, Western medicine doesn't say, well, like, why don't you lose weight? Like, why don't you stop having so much casual sex? They don't say that. They say, here you go. Here's a prescription. All right. Thanks, Big Pharma, for the cha-ching. Like, you don't
Yeah.
recognize that like your doctor is not there to serve you, and they were
Yeah.
not taught to treat your symptoms, or they were not taught to treat your illness, right? They're taught to treat the symptoms. So
Yeah.
the illness, they want you to be sick, right? Because then you keep coming back for more pills. They don't want you to
Yeah.
get better, they want the symptoms to go away. So like you just have to think about like who is really there for you and who has your best interests at heart, and who's getting paid by big pharma or big food or the GOP or the DNC or whoever it is, because they're not there for you. Like they're there for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and for sure, we're starting to realize maybe as a society that we are the product, and the more pills they can get into us, the more dependent we are. The people who focused on health are giving us things that don't necessarily denote a healthy person. It behooves them to keep us tied to hospitals, tied to services, tied to and it's not going all that great. I mean, we're not looking healthier as a nation.
No, not at all. It's getting worse, like with the Ozempic and all that. But on to your point, I heard an interesting way of putting it, which is that
Mm,
if something is free to you, then you are the product, not the
yeah, right.
consumer.
Yeah,
So if the app is free to you, then your data is the product. If the little blue
right.
pill is free to you, then you are the product. The fact that you keep going back to the doctor and they get to cash their check, like you have to realize that like nothing in this world is free, and you're
That's true.
paying with your freedoms and your health, in
Yeah,
one way or another if you think it's free to you.
yeah, yeah. The and just back to the website, because it's crazy that there are these places where you can do this. This really a sex exchange. How many of them are there? Do you think?
I know there were like lots of competitors and copycats. I remember while I was working there, there was like Ashley Madison, and they had like a direct
Hmm.
competitor called Arrangement Finders. There was like Sugar Daddy for Me. There's like, I mean, there's all kinds of them. But the bottom line is that they lie about what the true intentions are, which is that, if you actually join the website as a sugar baby, your
Hmm.
inbox is flooded with messages that say 500, no condom and stuff like that. It's like that's the real reality of what happens. But when
Uh,
you go to
uh,
the homepage, it says, date an affluent man that just wants to spoil you. And it's like, people believe it because it's what's on the
yeah,
internet, and they just willingly believe it because they want to believe it, right?
yeah,
They
yeah.
have this prince charming fantasy where this
Sure.
guy just wants to sweep you off your feet and take care of you and has the best intentions. Well, we all know the road to hell is paved with those good intentions. And
Mm,
if somebody is just willing to hand over money, like not in this economy, it's just not how it is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And Pretty Woman was a movie, not a real life thing. And it's just so improbable that something like that could ever happen. We have this ultra rich person who meets this model of a beautiful woman, and they fall happily in love, and it's a love story. It's ridiculous. But I guess we're willing to believe it.
A lot of them do want the pretty woman fantasy, but what they fail to acknowledge is like, why is that guy hiring a sex worker? Like,
Yeah.
why is he there in the first place? I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know if Richard Gere in that movie is like such a great guy that like just wants to take care of her. And if he's really so great, why does he need a sex worker?
Hmm.
Why can't he just go
Yeah.
pick up a hot girl because he's such a great guy? And the truth
Yeah.
is, like, because of birth control and women thinking they can have casual sex, right? They throw themselves at these high value men. So the
Hmm.
actual high value, high net worth men have a whole plethora of women to choose from who literally throw themselves at you and are
Yeah.
willing to have sex. So why would they feel the need to first of all go on a website but also get into a relationship when the sex and everything comes so easy to them? They
Right.
could care less about you. And they find that there's no repercussions for lying and manipulating women. To the contrary, the woman feels ashamed and she never says anything about it. And she goes off into the distance and tries again. And the cycle repeats. So it's like people just aren't seeing the big picture with when it comes to these types of websites and the people who inhabit them.
And if I'm at a job making whatever it is, $17 an hour, we just had a thing about a documentary called No Country for Old People, where the lady examines the the elderly care industry. If you're one of those workers who's understaffed and underpaid, and someone's sending you an email saying $500 no condom, all of a sudden you're like, I just need some money. Let me just go do this real quick. I'll take a pill. I'll be all right. And you just made a week's worth of salary in an hour or two. Maybe 2 minutes.
And I think what people oftentimes forget is that it's not as explicit all the time as 500 no condom. Like
Hmm.
like I detail in the book, like for me, my first experience like getting $1,500, he didn't say anything, but then after he gave me the money, I was like, "Ooh, like I guess I better like do something for it." So I like gave him oral sex and like I was like, "Ah,
Hmm.
well, not a bad deal." But that's like a very rare occurrence. It doesn't happen
Mm.
like that. But it's also just like, yeah, it's not so cut and dry. Like they
Yeah.
operate in this legal gray area, but the relationships are also in a gray area as well. It's like maybe sex isn't expected, but like if you don't do it, you're not going to get paid and you're not going to like ascend and you're definitely not going to get the $3,000 a month allowance that the website has touted for a long time. Like that just isn't real. Like it doesn't happen.
There's a $3,000 a month allowance.
Well, that's what when I was working for the company and they were touting more of the sugar lifestyle. Now, to be clear, they've completely scrubbed their website of
Mhm.
anything sugar related. So they
Okay.
don't pitch that, they don't mention that. They used to do a pitch, like a big press pitch about the top colleges for sugar babies. There was videos about sugar babies paying for tuition and all of that. And now like that's not on the website at all. Like it's all
Mm.
about it's not about that at all because the machine is already in place. Like they already have these people. And the biggest way that people join the website is through word of mouth. Like
Mhm.
someone
Mhm.
tells their friend and they say, "Hey, there's this little website where like you can get paid for sex." And I think that that gray area is a problem legally as well, right? Because when you think about two people who are engaging in sex for money, it's like well, the sugar babies, they don't believe they're sex workers. They're willing to
Mhm.
be paid for sex, but, like, I'm not a
Sure.
sex worker, right? And the sugar
Right.
daddies, they don't want a pro, like, they don't want a weathered, old you know what. Like,
Mhm.
they want someone who's fresh, and, like, they're willing to pay for sex, but they're not like Johns, like they're not like, so it's like if two people don't really think that they're engaging in sex work, then are they? Like legally are they?
Right.
So
Right.
it's this very
Yeah.
strange question that like I can't really answer, but I think the majority of people are getting scammed and sometimes trafficked. And when you say like sex trafficking, like people picture like, oh, being bought and sold like into slavery. It's like, no,
Right.
actually, sex trafficking is procurement of a sex worker, right? And then
Right. Right.
transporting her to somewhere to be paid for sex for someone else. And when people hear that, they're like, oh, like, wait, I've been sex trafficked before. It's like, yeah, if one guy got on the site and says, hey, come to my place for this party and like you don't have to do anything.
Mhm.
But then when you get to the party, you realize that like you're there to take drugs and then subsequently be paid for sex. Like, well, that man just trafficked you and you were just trafficked. Just because it's
Yeah.
consensual doesn't mean it's not illegal and immoral and going to
Right.
mess you up mentally for your entire life. I don't
Yeah.
remember what your
Yeah.
question was, but I hope I answered it.
No, I think you're getting it exactly right. We were talking about, but it doesn't matter. Let's just go forward. The $3,000 a month thing then
Oh
isn't a
yeah.
viable thing. It's just is that a fantasy, or does anybody actually even get paid that? And if they do, what do they have to do to get $3,000 a month?
So the $3,000 a month was something that they touted on the website. They would say the average sugar baby gets
Hmm.
$3,000 a month from her sugar daddy. And
Hmm.
that's not real. Like, there are
No.
very few, maybe like 0.05% of sugar babies who actually make that much money.
Hmm.
Not to say that some of them don't make more than that. Like, there are some sugar babies who make a lot of money, but they're sex workers, they're escorts,
Right.
they're going on dates, expected to have sex with this man and be his fantasy for the duration of his delusion. And then
Yeah.
she receives the payment. Like, it is what it is. And the
Yeah.
girls who do end up making that much monthly, they are the fantasy, right? He doesn't
Yeah.
want to come to his sex worker, his sugar baby, to be emotionally connected because he has his
Right.
wife for that, right? He
Right.
comes to the sex worker for easy, lovely sex, just like his wife probably was before he burned her in so many different ways and has been cheating on her for years. So, like, if you think that the pretty woman fantasy is ever going to happen, like, no, no, no,
Mm-mm.
no. Like,
Mm-mm.
maybe point 0.5, maybe you're one of those lucky 0.5%, but like I would not take those odds.
Yeah. How did you ultimately get into on the user side of it? What got you over the hump there?
I'm living in Las Vegas. I moved here when I was 15, and it became very clear to me that like this was the lifestyle. I had a fake
Mm.
ID at like 19, and so I was
Right.
always going out and partying, and at the clubs, the women are the commodity. So we get trotted around to the different tables with the rich guys because the rich guys don't want to spend money unless there's like hot girls fawning all over them. So I was kind of used to like being commodified as like a pretty girl, right? And I was told about the website by a friend of mine, like most people
Yeah.
are told about the website. And she said, oh, well, like, why don't you get yourself a sugar daddy? And at the time, I had just been scammed out of money by like a fake sugar daddy kind of guy. He told me that he was going to give me money to go and place a bet for him, and so I placed the bet, and then it lost, and then he never gave me the money, and so I was literally like I had $0 in my bank account, and rent was coming due. So I was like, shoot, like I actually became enticed at the idea of the website because my friend who told me about it told me they were doing a reality show casting because they email
Mm.
all the girls and they say casting for a reality show. So I was like, oh, cool. Like, maybe I'll be a reality star and a sugar baby instead of like, getting a job and going to college. I was like,
Right.
wouldn't that be
Yeah.
nice? I was like, might as well
Yeah.
try it out. So I joined the website. I emailed the casting department and I was like, hey, like, I
Um,
want to do the reality show. And so they cast me for this. It was not a reality show. It was like a one-off thing for like a production company, and like honestly I had no experience on the website, and the interview was probably so terrible that like they were unable to use it basically.
yeah.
And so that's how I ended up getting connected with the people who worked at the company. And I honestly thought that like, yeah, like, this could happen for me because like I was kind of used to guys treating me, or older guys like being around and paying for dinners and stuff like that. So it really wasn't a stretch of the imagination to think that
Yeah.
like I could get paid for this sort of thing. And people do. But that's not to say it's a good idea. Like, it's a really horrifying, traumatizing way to make
Yeah.
money as a woman. And if anyone tells you otherwise, like, I don't know that they're being sincere.
I used to live in Vegas, and I was Captain Morgan when I lived there, and so I would get hired, and I worked for Diageo, right? So I was their
Yeah.
Captain Morgan model, and they would have Morganettes, and all these beautiful, young women would work with me, and they were like, "Oh, thank God I'm working with Pete," because I wouldn't let anybody fondle them, and I took care of them as best I could within my little tiny little micro fraction of the crazy Vegas world. But Vegas is a fantasy, right? People do things they would never do anywhere else. That extra bump of cocaine or whatever it's going to be, all those things are possible. I met Captain Morgan tonight, that kind of thing. That happens in Vegas. And so when you live in this partial fantasy world, I mean, I've got to see behind the curtain there too. Like, yeah, oh yeah, no, those girls are hot girls. And when I'm working, and I also work for a golf magazine, and so I'm at a lot of events, and I'm like, that's Tina, that's Sandy, that's Christy. I know them because they are working at being hot chicks. Maybe they drive the golf cart around during the day, and then at night they put on the tiny outfit and they go do whatever, go to the clubs and all that kind of stuff. It is a fantasy world, and you really can think that you're next to get selected to be on a fantasy reality show or whatever. That is so sticky. I want to sign up for that. I'm like, oh my god, maybe that'll be my break, kind of thing. It's crazy.
Exactly.
It's crazy how easy that is to get caught up in that.
And that's the kind of mentality that I detail in the book, like how I came to those conclusions. And it is like a bit of a slippery slope, right? Because you think one thing and then you do another thing and then you do this and you're like,
Hmm.
oh, but this isn't so far off.
Yeah,
So it really,
yeah,
the logic really does add up in a way. But also to your point on Las Vegas, like, I mean, I think it's prevalent in many cities, but particularly in
sure,
Las Vegas, people have the misconception that like sex work is legal here because it does happen so rampantly. It's like the sex trafficking capital of the world, right?
right,
But it's actually not legal here. In Nevada, sex work is legal in brothels
right,
in counties that have less than 250,000 residents. So yes, you can drive a couple hours up north and go to the Bunny Ranch and have a legal sex worker in a brothel. But like sex work in the casinos, like that's not legal. But like people
yeah,
don't realize that. They're like, oh, anything goes in Vegas.
yeah,
And so yeah, I mean, I was a bit of a product of my environment, but it's not to say it doesn't happen elsewhere.
sure,
And I think elsewhere it's like it's more believable that like the wholesome side of it. That like, oh, there's just this business guy who like has a really loveless marriage and like just wants to give me money. It's like a very common scenario.
yeah,
So I think people, yeah, they get roped into the idea of that it could be real, but like, I mean, like I said, a broken clock is right twice a day. So it might be real for some people, but that doesn't mean it's
yeah.
gonna be real for you, girl.
Well, and so because I was the dude on the staff at the golf magazine, the strip clubs were my clients, and you get to know those girls too, and they were all about to quit. They were all gonna buy that extra house. They were all going to something, and maybe I'll get my teaching credential. But truly, they were all stuck, and they were waiting for something. And until they realized that I'm just a local guy working, okay, I'm just a local guy working. I'm not here to, I'm not mad at you, but don't talk to me for that reason. And so then they talk to me just as Pete, and you got a whole different view of what their life was like. And they were all just, and you can't help people who are stuck like that because heck, in my own way, I was stuck. I didn't make enough money. I was trying to figure out how to get forward, and I wasn't trafficking sex workers or anything, but I'm working as a model whenever they could hire me, which wasn't very often. The golf industry was okay, but it wasn't like I was like, I'm going somewhere here. That was very competitive. So we're all sort of stuck, especially in Vegas, because the strip feeds the economy, and it's very hard at the very bottom of it to think that you're going to get to the next level without a break. And breaks can be, they can be anything.
That's very true, especially like in a culture where it is cool to be flashy with your money. It doesn't really matter what's real, what's in your bank account. Like it's cool
Yeah.
to like have a designer watch and have a designer purse and have a nice car. So people are chasing money and spending all their money on looking rich. But if that's the one piece of advice that I would give to young girls is don't chase money. Like
Yeah.
beyond your basic needs being met, money will not make you happy. More money will not breed happiness. It will actually
Yeah.
make you empty. And what really does like breed happiness, like in your brain, is serving others and being
Mm,
kind and being positive and being a good person. Like that's where true happiness comes from. And if you think that
yeah.
you're going to be happy because you drive a G-Wagon, like I got news for you. Like it's not going to make you happy.
Yeah. And hanging out being fancy in Boca Park, and then you realize that it translates to Mouth Park.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the other thing is I think they once you have experienced those the finer things and you've like hung out with those people, you
Mhm.
start to realize that like the money just makes you a shell of a person when you
Mm,
have so much of it. And I used to be very enamored by men with money, and now I'm like a little bit repulsed by it because that just means that what women are falling all over you and you think that you can act however you want. I'm not saying it's everyone, but I mean, if it's a
sure,
single
sure.
guy and he's flashy, like it's probably the case that
Yeah,
he's not going to be the best guy to you. Like it's just he doesn't have to be because he gets what he wants without having to be a nice genuine guy. So
yeah,
I don't know, it's weird how it kind of flips once you like really get a sense for who these people
yeah.
truly are and what motivates them.
When you end up working on the professional side for the website, is that while you're still working as a user, or is that post user time?
Yeah, so I was a user on the website when I joined the company. I actually got ghosted by a sugar daddy who told me he was going to give me an allowance monthly. And then I don't know what I think I was a little bit too demanding of that money.
Mm,
And so he chose to ghost me. And I had just quit my job. I was a few credits shy of graduation. And so I hadn't applied for my next classes because he told me he was going to take me on a trip around the world. And then he ghosted me. So I was kind of stuck. And
mm,
the marketing manager of the company, I had met her and she had offered me a job. So I was kind of like stuck, didn't have a degree, didn't have any money. So I reached out to her. I was like, "Hey, like can I work for you?" And they pay people a lot of money there, to keep quiet and to be complacent. And the longer you
right.
stick around and the longer you keep your head down and the longer you're a good little soldier sipping the Kool-Aid, the more they cap on top, an extra 10K on top. My first year working there, right? I had just turned 23 years old
Oh my
and they
gosh.
gave me a $20,000 bonus at the end of the year.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I saw the problems
Yeah.
with the website, but shoot, like I didn't need a sugar daddy if I kept my mouth shut and I kept doing exactly what they wanted me to do. So, the money was too good to pass it up. And when you're so young, you don't really have a concept of like how your actions are impacting the world at large. Like to
Yeah.
me, I was just kind of like, oh, it's this little website and the website would be around even if I wasn't working here. So me working here, like I'm just getting myself ahead. And then as I ascended the ranks and as the popularity of the company grew, I learned about how the product is designed and curated. And that was very disturbing to me. Like
Mm,
I knew about the lies that I perpetuated in the media, and I was like, "Oh, but PR, it's about spin, right? It's about like you just lie to the media. It's just what you do, and that's what you get paid for." And like, while that might be true, I wasn't peddling toothpaste, like I was
right.
peddling a sex trafficking machine. So
Yeah.
it's hard to make the connections when you don't have the full picture. And then as I ascended the ranks, and continued to work there and got addicted to the money I was making and the status and like thinking I was important, I ended up learning about the different departments within the company more. Because at
Mm,
first they had us all siloed carefully, which is, a design of criminal enterprises where they don't want
mhm.
any one person to have too much information. And if any one person does get too much information, they get fired. So I didn't really have the full picture. But then my last year there, I ended up moving up into reporting directly to the CEO and really getting the big picture view of how each department contributes to criminality and to negligence of the benefit of the well-being of the users, specifically
Mhm.
the sugar baby users. And it's terrible. Like it's
Mm.
very disturbing to think that there's a product that's designed to only benefit the men who pay for it. And that's exactly what it is. And that's how the website is actually just like the mechanics of the website, like the buttons
Right.
here and the way and the terms and the way they interact with their users and the way they keep users on the site who are predatory. They don't kick them off the site because that's a bad user experience. They keep
Right.
them they keep them on the site and they give them a little slap on the wrist and they tell them, "Oh no, 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 like you better stop doing that." But instead of kicking them off because they could just make another profile, right? Because it's an anonymous site. Instead of
Right.
kicking them off, they just like tell them to do better. But in reality, they're not going to do better, and they know that they're the paying users, so they just do whatever the heck they want to do, and they know they can get away with it. There are users who
Yeah.
have been using the site for probably nearly 2 decades, right? They get older, and the girls stay the same age, right? But being of age isn't a requirement for most of these men. I would say that the majority probably of the men on the site like young girls. And that's why they come to seeking arrangement because there's lots of young girls there.
Yeah. Is boy, is there so much in this that I would like to explore, but it's such a it's so it's so much. It's crazy. When you write this book and you start talking about this, do the authorities come to you at all? Like, do they even have a ability to do anything? It just seems like it's obviously creating an illegal environment, but maybe they're not breaking the law, so it's okay. But I don't know. How do we do anything about this? Has anyone approached you to do anything about this?
So when I was working there was this law that was passed. So are you familiar with Section 230 at all?
Yep.
So Section 230 is the provision that governs the entire internet, right? It basically says
Right.
that websites are not responsible or legally liable, rather, for
Right.
the content that third-party users post. And when it was written back in 1996, like no one had any idea that the internet would be like
Right.
mostly user-generated content, and that this little provision would absolve criminals of activity by connecting users, right, for criminal activity. So in 2017, do you remember Backpage?
Mm-hmm.
The website Backpage. So it was basically like Craigslist for sex
Right.
workers, essentially. And Craigslist actually had a personal section as well.
They did. Yeah. Right.
Remember the roses or whatever. So
Mhm.
in 2017, the founder of Backpage was arrested for his involvement in sex trafficking because it was clear that this website was like being used for sex trafficking, sometimes of
Right.
underage girls. And he conveniently committed suicide in prison, just like Jeffrey Epstein. So I'll leave that
Wow.
there.
Yeah.
But while I was working there at the company, Backpage was shut down as a result of new legislation that passed. Okay. So Section 230 is an amendment to the Constitution, to the Bill of Rights, right? But FOSTA SESTA is like an amendment to the amendment. So it gets very hairy to even understand what the heck is going on. But FOSTA SESTA states that websites that facilitate, assist, or support sex work or sex trafficking are no longer covered by Section 230 and can be criminally and federally prosecuted for their crimes. Okay.
Right.
So when that happened in April of 2018, I was still working there and following the case very closely, of course, because it was a blueprint for how not to get caught and what not to
Right.
do. Um, so at the time, I was like, "Oh, shoot, like, it's the beginning of the end here," you know? And
Mhm.
I around the office, there was always, like, this air of paranoia. How they phrased it was, "If the feds ever crack down on sugar, like, we need to do this. We need to separate our assets. We need to fire this person. We need to split the company this way." There was just always obfuscation and, ways in which they were covering their ass, essentially, for
Mm.
eventual
Mhm.
prosecution. So they've been doing that since they started. So the website is still around. It's been around for almost 20 years. So as you can imagine, they've been doing everything they can to cover their butts, including starting an anti-sex trafficking 501c4,
I love
which
it.
is a
I love it.
nonprofit that doesn't have to report their earnings, of course, because it's not a 501c3, it's a 501c4. So they don't have to report any of their financials. That's another story I won't get into. But while I was working there, I was under the assumption that the website was going to be shut down. And so I was like, oh, this is bad, So I
Hmm.
assumed that I would be subpoenaed eventually. So when I was laid off along with 12 other people, I at the time I was already looking for another job. But like I said, they paid me so much money that like I was like young, I had already afforded myself this nice lifestyle. So like I couldn't afford to quit until I found another job that was going to pay me the
Right.
same amount of money. So I was in this sticky situation. So when they offered me a severance and fired me, I was like, oh, well, I guess this is the best it could have gone because y'all are going down after that law.
Yeah.
So imagine my surprise when here we are, like 7 years later, and the website's still around, hasn't been prosecuted. They get sued all the time. Like people settle with them. And I remember that happening while I was at the site. And I have been contacted by lawyers who are suing the website, who wanted information on the website. And I have reached out to, or I'm connected with a nonprofit called the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. And they are attempting to bring a case to the DOJ about seeking. They have like this really great webpage that says like encourage the DOJ to investigate seeking with like a prefab form, like the kind of like the write your senator type thing. So that's
Hmm.
the NSOCE, National Center on Sexual Exploit. Oh no, NCOSE. That's their website. .com.
NCOSE. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
and they're a really great nonprofit doing a lot of work to prevent sex trafficking, and I've talked to the lawyers there about their case that they're building. And fortunately, the internet and the content that that website has released lives forever. So they can
Mm.
actually use the website's own content against them, because there's no denying what they put out themselves and what they said. Even if it's not so accepted anymore and they've completely shed their skin and changed their tune, thank God for the Wayback Machine because
Yeah.
it exists. It's still
It
there.
exists.
But yeah, no, I'm actually surprised that I've never been reached out to by the DOJ. It begs the question, like, why aren't they prosecuting this website? Why have they not shut down this website that is obviously clearly criminally responsible
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
what's going on? And that's proven time and time again in the media. Like I don't got to be the one to tell you that. Like there's lots
Yeah.
of media stories that prove that this website is facilitating, assisting, and supporting sex trafficking, probably the website that does it the most, and yet it's still around. Like
No.
I mean, I just wonder, like, who are they protecting? Like,
Yeah.
and furthermore, I was reached out to by the New York Times and by ABC 2020 back in 2022. And, ABC flew me out to do this piece to New York, where they had this day of production buzzing around me, so I could tell my story. And I was confident that, 2020, the New York Times, right? Respectively, they were separate, not working together.
Sure.
I gave them everything I had. I was like, "Oh, like this website's going down, that these big conglomerates who have the ability to make the news and have the resources to truly do something to help the public because it is
Yeah.
of public interest and public concern that our children are being sex trafficked online, right? You would think that, they would publish those stories. And
Right.
here we are nearly 3 years later. And not only have they never published those stories, but they've ghosted me.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't know, like who are you really protecting here? Like,
It's a fair question, right? When you act like you don't care, we're going to assume you don't care, or worse, you're hiding something, right? And that's what we're talking about here is you have this clear problem with people being because the reality is the girl that gets on there and does a couple blowjobs and is like, not for me. It covered me in a time of lean money and gets away. Okay, fine. But the girl that learns that kind of subjective behavior or submissive behavior, or they accept these things, they end up further down the road in worse and worse situations where they're doing way worse things, being treated way worse, and it doesn't go well for them. And we see that cascade. It's easy to look at somebody who's had a hard life and be like, well, you were weak. Uh, or then you realize it's just a step-by-step process. I met a girl one time who was eating out of a dumpster, and I bought her a meal, and I was just talking with her, and I got to kind of know her a little bit. And she wasn't a fuck up. She was just a person that had gone on a journey and just through circumstance kept getting banged into the wrong answer over and over again as she tried to scramble day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute to survive. And gosh, it could happen to anybody, anybody, especially when you're talking like it's so enticing. The money, the fame, promise was like you too can be a celebrity, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's awful. And there's nothing we can do. It's all legal. No one's going to do anything about it. Or from what you can see, no one's done anything about it. Crazy.
It's not legal
It's
either.
crazy. Right.
Yeah, that's the thing is it's not being prosecuted, it's not being brought to justice,
Right.
but it is illegal, which like what does that even mean? And to
Right.
your point, reports from women's centers and nonprofits of sex trafficking of underage girls. Those
Yeah.
girls, 1/3 of the time, they report a sugar daddy website as the place where they met their trafficker.
Ugh.
So
Yeah.
traffickers are using this website. And let me be clear that colloquially, right, traffickers are called pimps. Okay.
Mhm.
So you have the vision of the pimp that like beats the girl or whatever, that's glorified to all hell, right? And
Mhm.
what really is happening is sex trafficking, right? And I'm sure we all remember the PIMP P Diddy, who is currently in prison on alleged
Yeah.
sex trafficking charges. So start putting the pieces together,
Yeah.
these traffickers, these pimps are meeting their marks on this website. And that's very
Mm.
clear. And I know
Yeah.
that because I've heard that personally from
Mm.
girls who tell me that their pimp, their trafficker is stalking them, threatening them,
Mm.
telling them that they're going to do horrible things to their family unless they continue in the lifestyle. So this is a website that perpetuates women being put in these vulnerable positions, and not just women,
Mm.
like all kinds of usually young
Sure.
people being put in these situations, and the cycle repeats because
Yeah.
the website's not shut down. So, I equate it. I mean, it's also being used as a honeypot, right? Like I equate
Oh,
it to like a decentralized Epstein, because these
yeah.
stories about Epstein, about Diddy, about the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, like when you look at their enterprises, they use fame and status to conduct their criminal enterprise, right? But that was years
Yep.
ago, because
Yeah.
they don't need enterprises anymore because they have seeking arrangement, where for $99 a month, they can easily conduct their crimes. And
Right.
it's
Right.
scary to think that that is public information, that is well documented, wide knowledge that many mainstream media organizations have their hands on. They know about this, but no one is talking about it. Like, I never thought when I was reached out to by the New York Times that I would be the one peddling and breaking this story. It was never
Right.
in my wildest dreams that I would that my book would be the one to say this.
Hold that book up. Hold that book up. Let me plug this
Yay,
thing one more time. Look at that thing. Look
yay.
at that thing. That's a fantastic book. And there's the link right there.
Yeah.
You can get it on Amazon. You can also you can go just to the website and get no hell on, go to this website instead. There you
Oh
go.
yeah.
And just brookurick.com. Everything you need is there, and you can learn more about this. This is it's crazy. Pitch the book to everybody right now, real quick. Let them know what they're getting.
So, Wink, Wink, Nudge, Nudge is a narrative memoir expose. It's about my own personal experiences using the Sugar Daddy website and working behind the scenes at the company synonymously. And really, what it is a series of vignettes. It's a very quick read, and I wrote it for people who like don't really like to read very much, because I know that like lots of sugar babies and like young girls, like I don't know, reading usually isn't their thing. But I wanted it to be so gripping and enticing, and you learn something in each short chapter based on my own personal anecdotes of what I went through. And it's me unpacking those things and how I came to those realizations. From when I was 14, being preyed upon by a 26-year-old man, to when I was 27, looking back, and those girls started to look really young. And how my mindset and shifted and changed based on those experiences, my personal experiences.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful. Thanks for coming
Thank
on the
you.
show and getting
Yeah.
into all this. It is crazy that you are the one breaking the news instead of the folks who are from the news, and God knows why 2020, flying you out seems like they're pretty far into the decision funnel to go ahead and pop this thing, but something stopped it. And we're left to wonder. And when we're left to wonder, we're left to guess. And when we guess, we don't guess in 2020's favor.
Yeah, I mean, catch and kill only really works for so long, and
Yeah.
eventually the story is going to come out. But it also led me to be more interested in independent media and journalists who are not beholden to big pharma or whoever else, and are
Right.
telling their own stories or subscriber funded. So, I mean, that's my
Yeah.
goal. I want to be part of the independent media space and wake people up a little bit, because I find myself doing that a lot. People are always telling me, "Oh, well, I never thought of it like that." I'm like, "Well, I hope you think of it like that now."
Yeah, yeah. And if you have no reason to be on or near a sugar baby website, you would never know this exists, right? It's just,
Stay
yeah,
away.
I know, right? Yeah, it seriously do stay away because it sounds like it's a terrible trap. All right, let
I
me
know.
roll the credits. I'll come right back to say goodbye to you, Brooke.
All
Everybody
right.
else, see you
Thank you.
tomorrow. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.